Why do some people seem just, entirely unstoppable, like they are effortlessly achieving their goals, while others struggle for years and just seem to stay permanently stuck? Is it luck? Or is it raw, unadulterated talent? Or is it something you do quietly every single day when absolutely no one else is watching?
Right. Well, the answer really lies in those small, repeated choices. It's the invisible architecture of our lives that dictates whether we thrive or whether we just simply survive day to day.
Welcome to this deep dive from Summary Sanctum. I'm Alex.
And I'm Bailey. We are your narrators, and we're so thrilled to welcome you to this custom deep dive.
Yeah, today our mission is to embark on a really massive, thorough exploration of Stephen R. Covey's phenomenal work, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We're going to look closely at the huge, often misunderstood difference between those quick, superficial fixes and, well, deep, enduring character growth.
Absolutely. And we're going to completely redefine what effectiveness actually means out there in the real world. We'll walk you through this step-by-step framework designed to move you from, total dependence on others to absolute self-mastery and ultimately to powerful creative cooperation.
It's a remarkable lifelong journey, honestly. But before we can even begin to talk about how to change our lives or what specific routines you should build, we have to look at the very foundation of how we see the world. We have to examine the actual mental map you are currently using to navigate reality.
Right, because if the map is wrong, the routines don't matter at all.
Exactly. So the sources we're analyzing today detail this fascinating study that was completed back in 1976. The author wanted to fundamentally understand the whole idea of success in America and how that idea evolved over time. So he went back through 200 years of popular success literature.
200 years, that's a massive amount of data.
Yeah, we're talking thousands of books, articles, summaries, all of it. And what he found was this massive seismic shift in how society defined a successful human being. For the first 150 years of that literature, almost the entire focus was on what is called the character ethic.
And the character ethic is, well, it's deeply rooted in foundational attributes. We were talking about things like integrity, fidelity, courage, compassion, responsibility, and justice.
The heavy stuff.
Right, exactly. The core philosophy here is that there are basic, unalterable principles of effective living. The belief was that people can only experience true success and enduring happiness if they integrate these deep principles into their basic character. It was entirely about substance.
But then, right around the 1920s and 30s, things changed dramatically. The literature shifted away from the character ethic to what the author calls the personality ethic.
Which is a huge pivot.
Huge pivot. Think about the era of the booming metropolis, the rise of PR, the whole obsession with looking good, dressing a certain way, and learning specific techniques to influence or even manipulate people. Success became all about the image you projected to the world.
It perfectly mirrors the rise of modern mass media, really, and early corporate culture. The focus shifted entirely from how to actually be a person of value to how to appear to be a person of value.
Yeah.
Society just became obsessed with the quick fix, the life hack, the instant charm.
Right, and the sources use a brilliant visual to explain this dynamic. They talk about an iceberg. So the personality ethic, the communication techniques, the firm handshake, the persuasive charm, that is just the tip of the iceberg.
It's just the visible part catching the sunlight above the water.
Yeah.
But beneath the surface, however, that's where the character ethic lies. It's the massive, invisible, underwater foundation. And the problem is society today spends all its time polishing the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, constantly buffing the ice.
Right. But if you don't do the heavy, unseen work on the foundation, the greatest long-term impact is just entirely lost. I mean, you can memorize all the communication techniques in the world, but if your underlying character is deceitful, or if you're secretly just trying to manipulate people to build your own economic success, well, eventually, the pressure will cause the ice to crack.
People will see the flaws.
They always do.
There's this vivid story in the materials about a university student who desperately tried to cut corners. He goes into his professor's office, sits down, and tries to casually ask, so how am I doing in your class?
I love this story.
It's so awkward. The tension in the room immediately spikes. The professor looks at him and basically calls him out on the spot. Because the professor knows, and the student knows, that the student has just been trying to psych out the system. He's been analyzing the professor's preferences, trying to figure out exactly what to say to get a good grade without ever actually learning the complex material.
Yeah, that interaction is the perfect illustration of the personality ethic failing in real time. It's just an illusion. You cannot fake actual deep-seated knowledge, just like you can't fake genuine character. To truly change and to truly be effective, you need an inside-out approach. You must give your absolute first energies to your own internal character development before you ever focus on those external techniques.
It reminds me of the famous story about Gandhi. Have you heard this one?
Remind me.
So, a mother travels a great distance, bringing her young son to Gandhi. She stands before him and pleads, "Please tell my child to stop eating sugar. It's ruining his health." Gandhi looks at the boy, thinks about it for a moment, and says to the mother, "Talk to me in a week."
Just sends him away.
Yeah, the mother is totally baffled, but she's obedient. So a week passes, she travels all the way back, and Gandhi finally looks the boy in the eye and says, "Stop eating sugar." The boy nods and agrees. The mother, now completely confused, asks Gandhi, "Why didn't you just tell him that last week?"
And Gandhi says,
Gandhi smiles and replies, "Because last week, I too was eating sugar."
"Oh, wow." The psychology there is profound.
Right.
He physically could not teach the principle until he embodied it himself. Unless we do the agonizing work on our own character, we cannot develop authentic trustworthiness. Trustworthiness isn't a PR tactic. It is the rare combination of both deep character and actual competence.
And this all comes back to that map we mentioned earlier, how we view the world, our paradigm.
Right, our paradigms. A paradigm is, simply put, a mental map. We all walk around assuming we see the world exactly as it is. We think we're these perfect, objective observers. But we actually see the world as we are. We project our own childhood background, our own traumas, and our own social conditioning onto every single event and interaction.
I want to paint a picture of an analogy from the sources that makes this incredibly clear. Imagine you fly into Portland for a crucial meeting. You step off the plane, rent a car, and the person at the desk hands you a physical map of the city. You drive off into the rain to find your hotel, but after 20 minutes, you are completely, hopelessly lost.
The worst feeling.
The absolute worst. You pull over, call a friend in absolute despair, and your friend gives you all this classic personality ethic advice. You just need to try harder, double your speed, change your mindset, think positively.
And none of that well-meaning advice will do you any good.
Because the person at the rental desk accidentally gave you a map of Seattle.
Oh no.
Yeah, it just happened to have the word Portland printed at the top. You can double your speed, but you are just gonna get lost twice as fast. You can sit in that car and have the most relentlessly positive attitude in the world, but you are still in the wrong city, according to your map. If your fundamental map of reality is wrong, your behavior and your attitude do not matter at all.
That's such a great way to put it. And connecting this to the bigger picture shows exactly why our modern obsession with quick fixes consistently fails. If your mental map, your internal paradigm is fundamentally flawed, tweaking your outward behavior will never solve the core issue. You don't need a new technique. You need a paradigm shift.
And paradigm shifts, they can hit you with breathtaking force. The material contains an incredibly visceral story about this. Picture a quiet Sunday morning on a subway in a major city. People are sitting peacefully, reading their papers, resting their eyes. It's perfectly calm.
Very serene.
Right. But suddenly, the doors open, and a man gets on with his kids. Instantly, the kids are absolutely out of control. They are running up and down the aisle, yelling at the top of their lungs, grabbing people's newspapers. It is pure, unfiltered chaos.
Meanwhile, the father just sits there, staring at the floor, doing absolutely nothing to stop them.
Nothing. You can physically feel the rising annoyance in that subway car.
Yeah.
It's the most natural human reaction in the world. People are glaring. Finally, the irritation boils over and a passenger turns to the father, barely containing their anger, and says, "Sir, do you think you could possibly control your children a little?"
And the father lifts his head, almost as if he's waking up from a deep, disorienting dream. He looks around, sees the chaos, and says softly, "Oh, you're right. I guess I should do something. We just left the hospital. Their mother died about an hour ago. I don't know what to think, and I guess they don't know how to handle it either."
God, just feeling the sheer weight of those words, it changes everything in a millisecond.
It does.
Your paradigm shifts violently. The intense annoyance completely vanishes, instantly replaced by overwhelming empathy and compassion. The screaming of the kids didn't change in that split second. The outward behavior was exactly the same, but the map of the situation changed entirely.
That moment forces us to question how we view the people around us every single day. We are constantly reacting to flawed maps. In fact, the source material highlights a psychological study involving a computer glitch in a school system that proves how dangerous these maps can be.
Oh, the IQ study.
Yes, the system mistakenly labeled a group of perfectly average students as bright and a group of highly intelligent students as dumb.
So the teachers were literally handed flawed maps of reality at the very start of the school year.
Exactly. And those maps dictated everything. The teachers unconsciously treated the bright kids with high expectations, patience, and encouragement. They treated the dumb kids with lowered expectations and frustration. Several months later, the administrative glitch was discovered. But when they retested the students, the results were staggering.
What happened?
The average kids who were labeled bright had actually gained significant IQ points. The truly bright kids who were labeled dumb had lost IQ points. It was a terrifying, self-fulfilling prophecy created entirely by the teacher's internal paradigms.
That's a terrifying self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
But I am struggling to square this purely character-driven approach with modern reality, though. If I look at the hyper-connected, image-driven corporate world right now, it feels like the tip of the iceberg is everything. Like, you can have the deepest, most pristine character in the world, but if you don't know how to package it, market it, or pitch it, you are entirely invisible. Doesn't the personality ethic actually matter immensely when you are trying to simply get your foot in the door?
That is a vital distinction to make. And the sources never claim that techniques are useless. Good communication, sharp presentation skills, and strong management tactics have real, undeniable merit. But the critical dividing line is this. If those visible techniques do not grow organically from the invisible roots of the character ethic, they inevitably become manipulative.
Right.
If you use charm solely as a mask to cover a lack of genuine character, time is your worst enemy. Eventually, the mask slips. People possess a deep, intuitive sense for duplicity, and once that foundational trust is broken, all the brilliant PR strategies in the world cannot repair the damage. Enduring, long-term effectiveness demands deep character roots.
Okay, that makes sense. So, if our paradigms dictate our behavior, and our current paradigms are often warped by our messy pasts, our biases, and our social conditioning, how do we fix the map? What should our paradigms be based on to ensure we are navigating reality correctly?
They must be anchored to universal principles.
Let's transition into this concept of principles then. The law of the harvest, and what true effectiveness actually looks like when stripped of all the modern buzzwords.
Well, we often confuse principles with social values. Social values are highly subjective, right? They shift wildly depending on the culture, the decade, or the current political climate. Principles, however, are timeless, self-evident, natural laws. Think of them like the law of gravity. You cannot argue with gravity, negotiate with it, or charm it into suspending its rules.
No amount of PR works on gravity. The text features a hilarious and profound anecdote about the absolute futility of arguing with reality. Picture a massive military battleship moving through the ocean on a pitch-black, stormy night. The captain is suddenly woken up and called to the bridge because there is a light dead ahead, and the other ship is refusing to yield the right of way.
So the captain, feeling the full weight of his authority, tells his signalman to flash a message. Move starboard 20 degrees.
But through the fog, the flashing light replies, move starboard 20 degrees yourself. The captain is incensed. He grabs the signal light and flashes back, I am a captain, move at once. The calm reply comes, I am a seaman second class, you move.
Oh boy.
Now the captain is in a total rage. He signals, I am a battleship, I will blow you out of the water.
And the final devastating reply cuts through the dark. I am a lighthouse.
I am a lighthouse. You cannot break principles. You can only break yourself against them.
It serves as a brilliant, humbling metaphor. We do not control the ultimate reality of the universe. We control our choices and our actions, but principles universally control the consequences of those actions.
And this ties directly into what the author calls the law of the harvest. Think back to being in high school or college. Society teaches us how to cram. You ignore the reading material all semester, play video games, and then stay up all night pounding coffee before the final exam.
We've all been there.
Right. And you might actually pull off a passing grade. In a socially constructed system, you can fake it.
But you cannot cram on a farm.
No, you cannot skip the grueling work of planting in the spring, slack off and go on vacation all summer, and then suddenly run out into the field in late October and try to cram in a harvest over a weekend. It's impossible. A farm is a natural biological system. It is strictly governed by principles, not social shortcuts.
The physical human body is another perfect example of a natural system governed by principles. The text presents a stark visual challenge. Imagine telling someone to drop to the floor right now and execute 20 flawless, straight-back push-ups.
You cannot fake physical strength.
No, you can't.
If you have spent the last year eating junk food, sitting on the couch, neglecting your health, no amount of positive thinking, persuasive charm, or PR techniques will magically lift your body off the floor. The physical laws of muscle atrophy do not care about your personality. You simply live with the undeniable consequences of your daily habits.
And this physical reality brings us to the core definition of effectiveness. In our modern culture, we constantly confuse effectiveness with mere efficiency. Efficiency is just getting what you want as fast as possible, regardless of the toll it takes. But true effectiveness is something much deeper. It is the careful maintenance of what the author calls the PPC balance.
Let's break that down because this is crucial. P stands for production. That is the desired result, the golden outcome you were chasing. PC stands for production capability. That is the asset, the engine, or the health of the system that actually produces the result.
The classic Aesop fable of the goose and the golden egg illustrates this dynamic perfectly. A poor farmer walks into his barn one morning and discovers his ordinary goose has laid a glittering, solid gold egg. He thinks it's a trick, but it's real. Day after day, the goose lays another egg.
The ultimate passive income.
Right. The farmer becomes fabulously, unimaginably wealthy. But with that wealth comes a dark psychological shift. He becomes impatient. He becomes greedy. He resents waiting 24 hours for a single egg. He wants all the gold inside the goose right now.
Driven by that impatience, he takes a knife, kills the goose, and cuts it open.
And he finds absolutely nothing. No eggs, no gold. In his blind rush for the production of the golden eggs, he completely destroyed the PC, the production capability of the goose itself.
We see this exact tragedy play out constantly in the business world. The sources share a story about a famous clam chowder house. The food was legendary. They used the best ingredients, and people would line up down the street just to get a bowl. It was a massive, enduring success.
A true golden goose.
Exactly. Then the original owners sell, and new management takes over. The new managers look at the spreadsheet and decide they want to instantly increase the profit margins. So they quietly start watering down the chowder and using cheaper ingredients.
They're aggressively going after the golden eggs.
Squeezing the goose.
Yeah.
And for the first month or two, the financial spreadsheets look incredible. Production is through the roof because their costs are suddenly so low. But invisibly, day by day, they are liquidating their customer loyalty. They are destroying the trust of the community, their ultimate production capability. Eventually, the customers taste the difference, realize the quality is gone, and stop coming entirely. The restaurant goes bankrupt. The goose is dead.
It's such a common story.
Yet, if I look at the corporate landscape today, it feels like the system actively incentivizes the people killing the goose. You see these newly hired executives who come in, slash the training budgets, defer critical maintenance on the equipment, and burn out their teams by demanding 80-hour work weeks.
Yeah, we've all seen that manager.
Right, and the quarterly profits look absolutely stellar. That executive takes those numbers, gets a massive promotion and a huge bonus, and moves on to another company, leaving a completely broken, traumatized department behind for the next manager to try and salvage. Doesn't the real world constantly punish the PPC balance?
You have identified a massive systemic flaw in how our short-term social value systems operate. Yes, you can absolutely fake success in a flawed, quarterly-driven system for a short period. But remember the law of the farm. The executive who burns out the team leaves behind a hidden trail of high turnover, shattered trust, and toxic corporate culture. Eventually, that reputation catches up to the individual, or the company itself collapses under the crushing weight of its own destroyed production capability. True effectiveness is about endurance. If your version of success relies on slowly destroying your greatest assets, whether that is your employees, your own health, or your marriage, it is nothing more than an illusion of success.
That is a heavy realization. To master this balance, to fundamentally align ourselves with unyielding principles rather than chasing short-term quarterly fixes, we have to mature, we have to grow up. The sources outline this journey of growth through a framework called the maturity continuum.
The maturity continuum serves as the philosophical roadmap for everything we are discussing today. It tracks human growth through three distinct, unavoidable stages: dependence, independence, and interdependence.
We all enter this world as infants, in a state of total dependence. Dependence is the paradigm of you. You take care of me, you feed me. And crucially, if something goes wrong in my life, I blame you. It is your fault.
As we grow and mature, we strive to reach independence. This shifts to the paradigm of I. I am responsible for my own choices. I am self-reliant. I can choose my path. Achieving true independence of character is what frees us from being constantly controlled by our circumstances or by the opinions of others.
But, and this is the concept that completely blew my mind, independence is not the finish line. Our modern society worships the lone wolf. We glorify the self-made billionaire, the isolated genius who doesn't need anyone. But the literature argues that the highest, most powerful level of human maturity is actually interdependence.
Right? Interdependence is the paradigm of we. We can cooperate. We can combine our unique talents and differing perspectives to create something infinitely greater than either of us could ever achieve alone. Building a lasting marriage, launching a successful business team, cultivating a healthy community, every single one of these requires deep interdependence.
But there is a massive non-negotiable prerequisite here. You cannot be interdependent until you are fully independent. You cannot run a marathon before you learn to walk. You cannot work cooperatively and creatively with other human beings if you do not possess internal self-mastery first.
That is precisely why the initial focus must be on achieving the private victory, moving from the mindset of dependence to the freedom of independence.
The very first step of that private victory is the core habit of being proactive.
And being proactive is often misunderstood as simply taking initiative, like, just stepping up at work. It goes much deeper. It means taking absolute, unflinching responsibility for your own life. It's the realization that your behavior is a product of your conscious choices, based on your deeply held values, rather than a product of your current conditions or fleeting feelings.
The opposite of this is being entirely reactive. Reactive people are like dry leaves caught in the wind. Their environment dictates their emotional state. They say things like, "The weather is terrible today, so my whole day is ruined," or "My boss criticized me, so I am going to be angry and unproductive." Proactive people, on the other hand, are like mountains. They carry their own internal weather with them, regardless of the storm outside.
The psychological core of proactivity lies in recognizing and expanding the microscopic space between a stimulus and your response. In life, something happens to you. That is the stimulus, and then you react. That is the response. For highly reactive people, there is zero space between the two. They are insulted, and they immediately scream back. But for proactive people, in that tiny fraction of a second between the event and the reaction lies our greatest human power, the ultimate freedom to choose.
The sources use a fantastic visual to map this out. Imagine two concentric circles. The outer, larger circle is your circle of concern. This holds absolutely everything you worry about: the global economy, the threat of war, what strangers on the internet think of you, the traffic on your commute. You expend immense emotional energy here, but you have zero actual control over it.
Right, zero control.
Inside that is a smaller circle,
Yeah.
a circle of influence. This contains the things you actually control: your daily habits, your attitude, your tone of voice, your work ethic.
Reactive individuals obsessively focus their time and energy on the circle of concern. They endlessly complain about the news, they blame their upbringing, they rage at the traffic, and because they're pouring all their emotional energy into things they cannot change, they neglect the things they can. As a result, their actual circle of influence shrinks. They become increasingly powerless and bitter.
Proactive individuals do the exact opposite. They deliberately ignore the massive circle of concern. They focus their laser attention purely on their circle of influence, and a magical thing happens. Because they're taking consistent, positive action in the areas they control, their influence actually begins to radiate outward and grow. They become more powerful.
There's perhaps no greater historical example of ultimate proactivity than the story of Viktor Frankl. Frankl was a brilliant psychiatrist who was imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp during the Holocaust. He was stripped of everything a human being can lose. His family was murdered, his life's work was destroyed, his clothes were taken, his physical freedom vanished. He was subjected to unimaginable daily torture and starvation.
It's unfathomable.
It really is. In the absolute darkest abyss of human suffering, surrounded by death, he experienced a profound psychological revelation. He realized that his captors controlled his environment completely. They could dictate whether he ate, where he slept, and whether he lived or died. But they could not reach inside his mind. They could not take what he called the last of human freedoms, the ability to choose his own attitude in any given set of circumstances. He focused purely on his internal spiritual response. He found meaning in his suffering. He nurtured his ultimate indestructible circle of influence.
When you hear a story like Frankl's, it strips away every excuse we have. I mean, if a man can remain proactive in a literal death camp, what right do I have to blame my bad mood on a delayed flight? But I do want to bring some realistic friction into this. What about people who are trapped in a genuinely toxic, abusive workplace, or who are completely wiped out by a devastating economic crash. Telling someone in deep systemic distress to just, be proactive can sound incredibly callous, almost like toxic positivity dismissing their real pain.
That is a very fair critique, and it is crucial to validate the reality of the pain. The stimulus is genuinely agonizing. Proactivity does not mean pretending the pain doesn't exist. Let's look at the example of two professionals who both lose their careers in a sudden, brutal economic downturn.
Okay.
The first professional lives entirely in the circle of concern. He is devastated, which is natural, but he stays there. He complains constantly, he feels doomed, he watches the news angrily, and he blames the corporate system. Months go by, and he remains paralyzed.
Right.
The second professional feels the exact same sting of injustice and fear. But after processing the shock, she shifts her focus to her circle of influence. She cannot change the global economy, but she can radically update her resume. She can spend 4 hours a day learning a new, highly demanded technical skill. She could reach out to 20 contacts a week. The reality of the economy is just as harsh for her. But by being proactive, she is the only one actually carving a path forward out of the wreckage.
Which brings us to the crucial second step of the private victory. Once you realize you have the power to steer the ship, you have to decide where the ship is actually going. This is the habit of beginning with the end in mind.
This concept is anchored in the universal principle that all things are created twice. First, there is a mental creation, the blueprint, the vision. Second, there is the physical creation, the actual building of the thing.
Yeah.
If you build a house, you don't just start blindly nailing boards together. You draw the blueprints first.
Right. And if you do not actively design the blueprint for your own life, society will aggressively design it for you. The source material offers an incredibly intense, almost chilling visualization exercise to help you find your blueprint. I want you, listening right now, to imagine driving to a funeral parlor. You park your car, walk through the heavy wooden doors, and smell the overwhelming scent of lilies and roses.
It's a heavy thought experiment.
Yeah, you hear the soft, somber organ music playing. You walk slowly down the center aisle, past the rows of grieving people. You walk up to the open casket, look inside, and you realize it is you. It is your own funeral, 3 years from today.
You take a seat in the front pew and watch as 4 distinct speakers come up to the podium. One from your immediate family, one from your close friends, one from your workplace, and one from your community or church. What do you actually want them to say about you? When your life is entirely over, what is the legacy you want to leave behind in their hearts?
Doing that exercise strips away all the superficial, noisy garbage we obsess over every day. I mean, nobody at a funeral stands up and says, "We will miss John so much. He consistently answered his emails by 8 p.m. and drove a really expensive leased car."
No, never.
It forces you to see your true end goal, because the tragedy is so many people spend their entire lives furiously, exhaustingly climbing the ladder of success. They sacrifice their sleep, their marriages, their health to reach the very top rung.
And only when they reach the top do they look around and realize, with sinking horror, that the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. They achieve the massive corporate promotion, but their kids won't speak to them. They build the multi-million-dollar business, but their physical health is completely destroyed by stress. Beginning with the end in mind is about making absolutely certain your ladder is leaning against the right wall before you start climbing.
Right, and the practical way to do this is by writing a personal mission statement, a deeply considered, written declaration of your non-negotiable values and your ultimate life vision. It becomes your internal compass. So, if the first step says you are the programmer and the second step says write the program, the immediate next challenge is execution. How do you actually walk that path day to day when the world is screaming for your attention?
That is the third phase of self-mastery, putting first things first. This is the physical creation, the daily discipline.
This is where the rubber meets the road. It is so easy to have a grand vision, but it is incredibly hard to live it on a Tuesday afternoon. It is not about simply prioritizing what happens to land on your schedule. It is about aggressively scheduling your actual priorities.
To understand the mechanics of this, we need to examine the time management matrix. It is a powerful tool that divides every single task we do in a day into 4 specific quadrants based on 2 critical factors. Is the task urgent, and is the task important?
Let's do a deep dive into these quadrants because this explains so much of modern anxiety. Quadrant 1 contains things that are both urgent and important. These are the screaming crises, the hard deadlines, the medical emergencies, the project that is due in front of the board tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
The fires.
Exactly, the fires. You absolutely have to handle these things. But if your entire life is spent putting out fires in Quadrant 1, your stress levels will eventually crush you. You will burn out.
Then you have Quadrant 3. These tasks are urgent, but completely not important. These are the endless interruptions, the ringing phone, the barrage of Slack messages, the coworker dropping by your desk with their own minor crisis.
The worst.
Right, and Quadrant 3 is highly deceptive. It feels like productivity because you are moving fast and constantly reacting, but you are actually just serving other people's priorities.
Yeah.
It does not move you an inch closer to your own life's vision.
And then there is the absolute trap of Quadrant 4. Not urgent and not important. This is pure, unadulterated time wasting. Think about your own life for a second. Look at your smartphone screen time report. How many hours last week did you spend in Quadrant 4? Numbly doom scrolling through social media feeds for 3 hours a night? Binge watching a mediocre streaming show you don't even really like, just to shut your brain off?
The psychological cycle here is tragic. Highly reactive people spend all day being battered back and forth between the high-stress crises of Quadrant 1 and the constant interruptions of Quadrant 3. By the time they get home, they are so mentally and emotionally fried that they simply collapse into the escapism of Quadrant 4. But highly effective, proactive people operate entirely differently. They fight relentlessly to live in Quadrant 2.
Quadrant 2 is the magic zone. It contains tasks that are not urgent, but incredibly important. This is where human greatness is forged.
Exactly. Quadrant 2 is about prevention. It is about deep, undistracted work. It is relationship building. It is long-term strategic planning. It is going to the gym. It is reading a complex book to upgrade your skills. The catch is that Quadrant 2 activities will never ever shout at you.
Right.
Your gym shoes do not send you an urgent push notification. Your life's mission statement does not have a Friday deadline. These things are quiet. They require you to be proactive to execute them. But they are the very foundation of all long-term effectiveness.
The famous big rocks analogy explains the friction of this perfectly. Imagine you have a large, empty glass jar sitting on a table. Next to it, you have a pile of big, heavy rocks, a cup of small pebbles, and a cup of fine sand. Your goal is to fit everything into the jar. If you pour the sand in first and then dump in the pebbles, the jar is already mostly full. When you try to place the big rocks inside, they simply will not fit. They stick out over the top.
In your daily life, the sand represents the trivial, mind-numbing tasks, the Quadrant 4 doom scrolling. The pebbles are the daily chores and minor emails. The big rocks are your absolute core priorities, your physical health, your deepest relationship, your major life project.
If you do not intentionally, fiercely place the big rocks into the jar first thing in the morning or first thing in your weekly calendar, the world will automatically fill up your time with sand and pebbles. You have to schedule your priorities before the chaos begins. But I want to pause and acknowledge how psychologically grueling this actually is.
Oh, it is.
We are fighting biology here. The urgent things in our modern world literally hijack our nervous systems. Our phones are engineered by thousands of brilliant developers to trigger our dopamine receptors with bright red, urgent notifications. Meanwhile, the important things, like going for a silent run or sitting down to have a difficult, vulnerable conversation with your spouse, are completely silent and often uncomfortable. It takes an incredible amount of willpower and courage to look at a ringing phone, smile, and non-apologetically say no to the small stuff in order to protect your big rocks.
It does require immense courage. But the mindset shift is realizing that every single time you give a weak, people-pleasing yes to an unimportant distraction, you are simultaneously giving a silent, hidden no to something vital in your life. Mastering Quadrant 2 requires the ruthless discipline to protect your deepest values.
Mastering these first three phases, taking the wheel through proactivity, drawing the map with your vision, and driving the car through disciplined execution, that gives you the private victory. You have officially achieved independence. You are no longer a victim of your circumstances or your impulses.
It is a massive achievement. But as we discussed with the maturity continuum, an isolated life is a limited life. To achieve true greatness, to unlock creative cooperation with the rest of humanity, we must venture into the realm of interdependence. We must pursue the public victory. But you cannot simply leap from independence to complex teamwork. You have to build a sturdy bridge first. And that bridge is built entirely out of trust. We have to understand the mechanics of the emotional bank account.
I love this concept so much because it quantifies something invisible. The emotional bank account is the PC, the production capability of all human relationships.
It operates just like a financial bank account at your local branch. In every interaction you have with another human being, you are either making a deposit or taking a withdrawal. A deposit builds the reserve of trust. It looks like an act of genuine kindness, keeping a difficult promise, apologizing sincerely when you are wrong, or clearly communicating your expectations up front. A withdrawal depletes that trust. It looks like a broken promise, a sarcastic, dismissive comment, ignoring someone or betraying a confidence.
Right, and if the trust level is incredibly high, if you have spent years making deposits and the account has a massive, wealthy, balanced communication is actually effortless. You can stumble over your words, you can even make a mistake, and the other person will catch you. Because they know your heart, they give you the absolute benefit of the doubt. The trust acts as a shock absorber for the friction of life.
But if the account is overdrawn, if you have spent years making withdrawals through neglect or deceit, the relationship is bankrupt. At that point, every single interaction is a dangerous minefield. You have to carefully weigh every word you say because the other person is constantly reading between the lines, assuming the worst possible intent.
There is a gut-wrenching story in the material that illustrates a bankrupt account. A man is attending a leadership seminar on the beautiful, serene Oregon coast. It is a stunning environment, but the man looks totally miserable. During a break, he pulls the instructor aside and confesses that he cannot focus or enjoy the trip because his marriage is a nightmare. He says his wife constantly grills him. Every time he calls home, she interrogates him. Where exactly were you? Who are you talking to? Give me a name so I can call and verify that.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. So the instructor listens, realizing the account is massively overdrawn. He starts asking a few gentle, probing questions about their history. Finally, the man breaks down and admits a crucial piece of context. He actually met his current wife while he was away on a business trip, while he was still married to his previous wife.
Oh, well, that context changes everything.
Doesn't it? The foundation is built on deceit.
Exactly. The instructor looks at him and delivers a very hard, unyielding truth. You cannot talk your way out of problems that you behaved your way into. Right. The law of the harvest applies to human relationships just as strictly as it applies to agriculture. You cannot use slick PR techniques, flowers, or charming apologies to instantly fix a bankrupt emotional bank account. You have to patiently, painfully make small, consistent deposits over a long period of time to slowly rebuild the trust.
According to the sources, one of the most powerful, massive deposits you can make into anyone's account is practicing loyalty to the absent.
This is a profound test of character. If you want to build unshakable trust with the person sitting right in front of you, you must demonstrate absolute loyalty to the people who are not in the room.
The ultimate withdrawal, the quickest way to bankrupt an account, is bad-mouthing someone behind their back. If you and I are sitting in the break room and we spend 20 minutes viciously tearing apart a mutual colleague who isn't there, you learn something very important about my character in that moment. You learn that the second I leave the room, I am fully capable of doing the exact same thing to you.
It is the ultimate proof of duplicity. The author of the source material actually shares a highly vulnerable story about his own failure in this specific area. He was working as a visiting professor at a university, and he found himself in the office of the university president. The author was furious about an administrative issue, and he started complaining bitterly about the housing director. He was just laying into the guy, calling him incompetent and difficult.
And the university president calls his bluff in the most epic, uncomfortable way imaginable. The president listens calmly, nods, and says, "I am so sorry to hear you were having this terrible experience. The housing director is actually a very fine person. Let me just pick up the phone and call him over to my office right now, and the three of us can sit down and solve this problem together."
The author experiences total internal panic. He never actually wanted to talk to the housing director to solve the issue. He just wanted the dark thrill of talking about him to a superior. By the time the housing director walks through the door, the author's demeanor completely flips. He is suddenly acting incredibly sweet, accommodating, and polite.
So awkward.
And the university president sits back and sees right through the utter hypocrisy. As the old proverb goes, a double-minded person is unstable in all his ways.
I have to admit, though, that in the modern workplace, complaining about a mutual enemy often feels like a deeply bonding experience. If two exhausted coworkers hate the same micromanaging boss, going out for drinks and venting about that boss feels like it builds a trench warfare kind of connection. It feels good in the moment.
It absolutely creates a feeling of connection, but it is a false, highly fragile bond. It is a bond based entirely on shared negativity and rebellion, not on principle-centered trust. In the back of both of those coworkers' minds, a tiny seed of distrust has been permanently planted. They both know the other is capable of betrayal. Real, enduring trust requires the integrity of defending those who cannot defend themselves.
Once that emotional bank account is deeply funded and healthy, the bridge is built. We are finally ready to step across into the public victory. We are ready for interdependence. And the foundational mindset for that is thinking win-win.
Thinking win-win requires a fundamental, radical shift in how we view the universe. It is the challenging move from a paradigm of scarcity to a paradigm of absolute abundance.
Almost all of us are deeply conditioned from childhood with the scarcity mindset. We are taught to view life, success, and resources as a fixed pie. If you get a promotion or a big slice of success, that mathematically means there is less pie available for me. Your win inherently equals my loss.
This scarcity mentality leads to two very destructive relationship dynamics. First, the win-lose dynamic, which is highly competitive, authoritarian, and relies on power and intimidation. Second, the lose-win dynamic, where one person plays the martyr. They constantly cave in, swallow their feelings, and let the other person win just to keep the peace, which inevitably builds up a toxic reservoir of hidden resentment.
But the win-win paradigm shatters that illusion. It says the pie is not fixed. Through cooperation, we can actually bake a much bigger pie. It requires a very delicate balance of two traits: immense courage, the willingness to clearly and strongly stand up for your own needs, and deep consideration, a genuine, empathetic care for the other person's needs.
And if you are negotiating with someone and you truly cannot find a creative solution that is a genuine, authentic win-win for both parties, the highest principle is to possess the courage to agree to no deal. You peacefully walk away without damaging the relationship rather than forcing a strained compromise that leaves someone feeling cheated or manipulated.
But to ever achieve a win-win reality, you absolutely desperately need the next tool in the arsenal, seeking first to understand, then to be understood.
This is the habit of empathic communication, and it directly addresses the single biggest, most pervasive communication flaw in the human species. Most people do not listen with the intent to truly understand the other person. They listen solely with the intent to reply.
It happens all the time. You are telling me a story about a hard day you had, and I am not actually absorbing your pain. I am just waiting for you to take a breath so I can jump in with my own slightly better story or throw unsolicited advice at you. I am projecting my own autobiography onto your unique experience.
True empathic listening is exhausting because it requires listening with your ears, your eyes, and your heart. It requires you to make yourself entirely vulnerable. You have to be genuinely willing to be influenced, to have your mind changed before you ever attempt to influence the other person. You must rigorously diagnose before you prescribe.
The sources use a medical analogy that is terrifyingly accurate. Imagine you are feeling terrible, so you walk into a doctor's office. You sit down, but before you can even open your mouth to describe your symptoms, the doctor just reaches into his pocket, hands you a bottle of heavy prescription pills, and says, "Here, just take these. They worked great for me last week when I had a headache."
You would run out of that office.
You would never trust that doctor with your life.
Because that doctor committed malpractice. They prescribed a solution without ever diagnosing the actual problem. Yet, we commit emotional malpractice constantly in our daily relationships. There's a heartbreaking story in the text about a frustrated father. He comes to the author and says, "I am at my wit's end. I just cannot understand my teenage son. He simply won't listen to me."
And the author gently points out the massive logical flaw in that statement. He says, wait, let me get this straight. You want to understand your son, but you think the core problem is that he won't listen to you. To understand someone, you have to listen to them.
The father pauses, the light bulb goes on, and he admits, "Well, I guess I do listen to him sometimes. But honestly, I only listen to him so I can correct his flawed thinking."
Wow.
He isn't holding any safe space for his son's reality. He's treating his son like a broken machine. He's trying to quickly fix the boy with his own adult logic, without ever attempting to enter the boy's confusing emotional paradigm.
Why do we do this? What is the psychological mechanism that makes our default setting to just aggressively throw advice at the people we love?
It is a massive ego trap. Human beings love to feel competent. We want to be the hero who rides in and instantly solves the problem. But when someone you care about is in deep emotional pain or confusion, Throwing cold, logical solutions at them feels like a harsh dismissal of their feelings. They don't need a mechanic to tighten their bolts. They need a witness to their human experience.
That's beautiful.
When you suppress your own ego and offer pure, silent empathy, you give them what the author calls psychological oxygen. When someone is suffocating emotionally, they cannot hear your brilliant advice.
Wow.
Only when you listen deeply, allowing them to vent and breathe easily, will they ever lower their defenses and be open to hearing your perspective.
Which perfectly transitions to the second half of the habit, then to be understood. Once they feel completely heard and validated, you have earned the right to speak. And when two human beings communicate with that level of deep, mutual understanding, the stage is finally set for the ultimate breathtaking peak of human effectiveness.
That peak is habit 6. Synergize.
Synergy is the almost magical state where 1 + 1 does not equal 2, it equals 3, or 10, or 100. It is the absolute pinnacle of creative cooperation.
It is vital to understand what synergy is not. Synergy is not a compromise. In a standard compromise, both people give up a little bit of what they really want so they can awkwardly meet in the middle. In a compromise, 1 + 1 equals 1.5. Everyone walks away from the table feeling slightly dissatisfied and irritated.
Right.
Synergy, on the other hand, is the collaborative hunt for a third alternative, a totally new, uncharted solution that is substantially better than what either person originally brought to the table.
The sources mention a beautiful, natural example of synergy, the relationship between bees and flowers. The bees desperately need nectar for survival. The flowers desperately need cross-pollination to reproduce. They do not compromise. The flower doesn't give up half its petals, and the bee doesn't give up half its wings. They interact in a wildly complex way that gives both parties exactly what they need, and in the magnificent process of that interaction, they create abundant new life across the entire ecosystem.
Achieving that level of synergy in human relationships requires deeply, genuinely valuing differences, not just tolerating them with gritted teeth. If two people in a boardroom think exactly alike, one of them is completely unnecessary.
Let's look at how this plays out in a real, highly stressful scenario. Take a husband and wife who are locked in a bitter argument. The husband just got an incredible, once-in-a-lifetime job offer in a new city across the country. He desperately wants to move to advance his career. The wife, however, wants to stay exactly where they are because her mother is growing older and her health is failing, and she wants to be close by to care for her.
If they operate in a win-lose paradigm, one of them forces their will on the other, and the loser builds a lifetime of resentment that could eventually destroy the marriage. If they try to compromise, they might decide to move to a city halfway between the two locations. But that is a terrible solution. The husband now has an exhausting, hours-long commute to the new job, and the wife is still too far away to visit her mother daily. It is a lose-lose dressed up as a compromise.
But if they've built a massive emotional bank account and they truly practice empathic listening, they can synergize, they seek that elusive third alternative, they sit at the kitchen table for hours brainstorming without judgment. Maybe they discover a way for him to take the new role but work remotely from their current city. Maybe they agree to move to the new city, but they use the massive salary increase to build a beautiful in-law suite and bring the mother to live with them, completely solving the caregiving issue. They simply refuse to stop communicating and innovating until they invent an option that fully, joyfully satisfies both of their underlying deepest needs.
It's powerful stuff.
I want to offer an analogy here that brings this to life. Synergy is exactly like building a walk band. If you put 5 incredibly talented lead singers in a room, you do not have a band. You have a chaotic mess of competing egos all trying to hit the same high note. To actually make music that moves people, you need radical differences. You need the heavy, rhythmic thud of the bass guitar. You need the erratic, crashing energy of the drums. You need the soaring melody of the lead guitar. You need the sheer, undeniable friction of those vastly different instruments colliding to create harmony.
That is a flawless analogy. The friction of those differences is exactly what generates the creative spark. If you surround yourself in business or in life only with clones, people who share your exact background and agree with your every thought, you will never ever experience synergy. You must not only tolerate differences, you must actively seek them out and celebrate them.
So, if we step back, we have climbed the entire mountain. We have painstakingly mastered our internal character through the private victory. We have built unshakable trust, and we have unlocked the immense power of creative cooperation in the public victory. We are standing at the absolute peak of human effectiveness. But there is a glaring practical problem looming over all of this. How on earth do you sustain this intense level of living without eventually burning out and crashing?
That brings us to the final piece of the architecture, the habit of sharpening the saw. It is the quiet, continuous habit of balanced, deliberate self-renewal.
The imagery the author uses for this is painfully relatable for anyone in the modern workforce. Imagine you are walking through a dense forest and you come across a man who is furiously, frantically sawing down a massive oak tree. He has been at it for 5 straight hours. He is drenched in sweat, his muscles are shaking from exhaustion, and he is making almost zero progress. The blade is totally dull. You walk up to him, tap him on the shoulder, and say, "Excuse me, you look exhausted. Why don't you stop for just 10 minutes and sharpen your saw? It will go so much faster."
And the man glares at you, wipes the sweat from his eyes, and screams, "I can't stop. Can't you see I'm too busy sawing?"
We are that man. Every single day. We get so violently caught up in the urgency of production and hacking away at our endless daily task lists that we completely neglect our ultimate production capability, our own minds and bodies.
This final habit surrounds and encompasses all the other habits we have discussed. It ensures that you are constantly, lovingly maintaining the core asset that makes everything else in your life possible.
Really?
And it requires intentional renewal in 4 distinct, interconnected dimensions: the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual.
The physical dimension is the most obvious, but often the first neglected. It is protecting your sleep, committing to cardiovascular and strength exercise, and eating nutrition that fuels the machine. The mental dimension is about continuous aggressive learning. It is reading challenging books, exploring new philosophies, and expanding your cognitive horizons rather than letting your brain atrophy in front of endless television broadcasts.
The emotional dimension is about deliberately nurturing your human connections. It is making those crucial deposits in the emotional bank accounts of your family and friends. It is practicing empathy. And finally, the spiritual dimension is about continually reconnecting to your absolute core values and your life's vision. For some, that is deep prayer or meditation. For others, it is spending quiet, unplugged time in the stillness of nature.
The sources also detail an incredibly powerful method for supercharging this renewal process, particularly the mental and emotional learning dimensions. It is called the 3-person process.
Yes. The underlying truth of the 3-person process is that the absolute best way to deeply learn and internalize any concept is to be forced to teach it to someone else.
The process flows like this. Person 1 learns a new concept, actively applies it to their life, and then turns around and teaches it to person 2. Person 2 listens, captures the knowledge, thinks critically about how to apply it to their own unique circumstances, and then immediately turns around and teaches it to person 3.
When you walk into a room knowing that you are going to have to teach the material to someone else later that day, your entire paradigm of learning shifts drastically. You do not listen passively, just waiting for the lecture to end. You listen highly actively. You look for the underlying mechanics. Furthermore, the very act of teaching bonds the relationship between the two people because teaching requires authenticity, vulnerability, and a shared commitment to growth.
I do feel the need to bring up a significant modern cultural issue regarding this idea of renewal. The phrase "sharpening the saw" feels like it has been hijacked by the massive, commercialized self-care movement on social media. Far too often today, self-care is weaponized as a sophisticated excuse for mere pampering, pure hedonism, or just escaping the difficult realities of life. It becomes a socially acceptable excuse for laziness. People will say, "I can't handle my responsibilities today. I'm fiercely protecting my peace and sharpening the saw by taking a 3-hour bubble bath, drinking wine, and scrolling TikTok."
That is a critical, vital distinction to make. True, principle-centered renewal is absolutely not escapism. It is not checking out of your life because it got too hard. It is the active, highly deliberate maintenance of your production capability. Sitting motionless on the couch, eating junk food, and ignoring your family actually dulls the blade. Running a difficult mile in the rain, reading a complex book that challenges your worldview, or having a deeply vulnerable, difficult conversation with a friend to clear the air, those are the things that actually sharpen the blade. It is an active, demanding discipline that creates a continuous upward spiral of growth, keeping you sharp for the heavy lifting of the other habits.
Wow, okay. Let's take a deep breath, stand back, and look at the sheer scale of the mountain range we have just climbed together today.
We started at the absolute bedrock by examining our internal paradigms, realizing that true, enduring change can only come from the inside out. We learned that success must be rooted in the character ethic and aligned with timeless, unyielding natural principles.
From there, we fought for the private victory. We stripped away our victim mentalities and took total responsibility for our choices by being proactive. We defined our ultimate destination by beginning with the end in mind. And we learned to ruthlessly protect our big rocks by putting first things first.
That grueling internal work moved us from dependence to true independence. Then, we tackled the complexities of the public victory. We learned to think win-win, completely abandoning the toxic scarcity mindset. We practiced the exhausting art of empathic listening, seeking first to understand before opening our mouths. And we combined our diverse strengths to synergize, creating beautiful third alternatives.
Moving us from independence to the ultimate peak of interdependence. And finally, we wrapped that entire architecture in the discipline of continuous renewal, actively maintaining our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health to keep the upward spiral moving indefinitely.
It is a profound, demanding, lifelong journey. It is the exact opposite of a quick fix. It is the fundamental, invisible architecture of a truly, deeply effective human life.
As we wrap up our time together on this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final thought to mull over. Something that builds on everything we have explored regarding paradigms, enduring principles, and the ultimate legacy we leave behind.
Think back one last time to that quiet, flower-scented room and the funeral visualization.
What if the ultimate test of your personal effectiveness on this earth isn't actually what you personally achieve, build, or consume in your brief lifetime? What if true, principle-centered effectiveness is actually measured by the people you empower? The people who quietly watch your character day in and day out, who internalize your principles through your example, and who carry that light forward into the world long, long after you are entirely gone.
That is the ultimate, enduring legacy of a life lived in true interdependence.
Thank you for joining us here in Summary Sanctum. Remember, all the philosophy in the world is useless until it is put into action. Knowledge only matters when it is lived. Until next time.